The 2021 season ended in unthinkable fashion for the Indianapolis Colts, getting trounced by the lowly Jacksonville Jaguars in Week 18, eliminating them from the postseason. It was enough for Colts brass and ownership to turn the page on the Carson Wentz era, with Jim Irsay making it quite clear who was responsible for the team underachieving. And to replace Wentz, Indy swung a trade for former NFL MVP Matt Ryan in a move the Colts are hoping brings more stability to a talented roster.
I am so excited to see what can happen here. I'm coming into a roster that has been set up to win.
Ryan will certainly have more tools at his disposal than he did in recent years with Atlanta, including three-time All-Pro guard Quentin Nelson and the 2021 rushing champ Jonathan Taylor, who also has lofty goals for this upcoming season.
You try to be the best every year so that the coaches and teammates trust you day in and day out and know exactly when 28 is on the field, we're going to get high level of play.
In free agency, the Colts, as they normally do, practice patience, but they did bring in former Defensive Player of the Year Stephon Gilmore. And if he can return to the form he showed in 2019, it'll be a big boost for a defense that finished near the bottom of the league in interceptions. Vegas believes the Colts upgraded from last season and are favored to win their first AFC South title since 2014. Will they live up to expectations? Countdown to Week 1 continues. And with that, let's head to Westfield, Indiana, Colts camp with Rick Spielman and Pete Prisco. Guys, great to be with you. I've got some questions, but first off, I want to hear what you guys are experiencing out at camp right now. What's sort of the topic du jour, a biggest conversation that you guys are experiencing out there?
Well, first off, the location of this camp is really interesting. There's a farmhouse about 100 yards that way, and they're going to invite us over for lunch a little later on, and we're going to pick some corn. We got so many farm-like things to do, Rick. I mean, this is amazing.
You're way out of your element here.
I am.
Some city slicker from New York. It's a little bit of an adjustment, but Pete's trying to do his best to make it work today.
When we take a look at the odds, some were surprised, guys, that this team, the Colts, are the betting favorite -120 when the Titans are there at +160. Were you surprised maybe hearing about the odds coming into this season?
Well, I wasn't, because I think Matt Ryan is the difference. I mean, this is a good football team last year, should have been a playoff team, lost the game at Jacksonville, and Matt Ryan is a big step up from Carson Wentz, at least in my mind. I think Matt Ryan, at 37 years old, can still play at a high level. He didn't throw for 4,000 yards last year, so his streak was snapped at 10 straight seasons, but there were reasons for that. He had no weapons. The offensive line wasn't very good. I think he's the difference in this team getting to win the division.
Yeah, and they're going to have to run the ball as well. Jonathan Taylor, who's probably the most productive running back in the NFL right now, he's going to have to carry that offense until Matt Ryan gets underneath, get his feet underneath him. But listen to some of the press conferences coming in here today. They compare Matt Ryan to what Phillip Rivers did for them a couple years ago.
We'll talk about JT in just a bit, but let's stick with Matt Ryan. And Rick, I'll start with you, because from a front office perspective and what Jimmy Irsay and the ownership group does, they've kind of, since Andrew Luck, gone with that veteran route. You bring up Phillip Rivers and Carson Wentz, now Matt Ryan. I know they have Matt Corral that they hope will be the guy in a year or two, but how do you sort of assess that approach to the quarterback position over the last handful of years for this franchise?
Yeah, no, I'm anxious to talk to Chris Ballard today and to see what his basically response is to how they've been handling the quarterback situation. But when I look at it from a GM perspective, they're in a win-now mode. They know they have a good team. They have a very talented roster as long as they can stay healthy. I don't know how much depth they have on this roster, but Matt Ryan gives them the chance to be and go as far as they could potentially go.
Yeah, and when you look at Matt Ryan, you know, a lot of people say he's not the same guy. I don't buy that. I think Matt Ryan, is he the MVP he was a couple years ago? Probably not, but he can still play at a high level. And again, I go back to the offensive line. In Atlanta, he was brutalized. He was sacked over 40 times in 4 straight seasons, 44 times last year. This offensive line is better than what they have in Atlanta, so I think he'll get protected a little bit better. There are concerns about the passing game on the outside. They have some questions out there. He's going to have to adjust to probably not having that big play Julio Jones type wide receiver, but Michael Pittman's a good player. Alec Pierce, a rookie from Cincinnati, is a guy to keep an eye on, and they have to get Paris Campbell on the field.
Yeah, and he's been hurt the last 3 years ever since he's been in the league, and he was an explosive playmaker, excellent athlete coming out of Ohio State, but has yet to produce where they drafted him, I believe, in the second round back in 2019.
All right, and speaking of Matt Corral, by the way, in Carolina, it was in my head in the combine trying to get him back with Michael Pittman, by the way, so like that cleared up. But again, Matt Ryan is there, the veteran out in Indianapolis. All right, let's get to Jonathan Taylor, guys. Of course, 1,800-plus rushing yards, 18 touchdowns, and of course, 17 out of 17 games played. The question then becomes, for him, what are the chances he has the same production here in 22?
I don't think he's going to. I just don't. I think he's a really good player. I think there's some concerns about the offensive line. The left tackle spot. Matt Pryor will probably start there. The right guard position, there's concern there as well. I just don't think this is a dominant offensive line. Now, he's a great player, don't get me wrong. Here's the other thing to take into account. He's carried the ball a lot the last 2 years. I think it's 650 times. That's a lot of carries for a guy. Eventually, that starts wearing down on you. I don't think he's going to have the same type of season he had a year ago. Very productive, Pro Bowler, but not the same type of season.
Yeah, but the one thing I would counter you on is that usually a running back with this type of skill set makes the offensive line look a lot better too. So there's a lot of times that he can make up that there is something missing at the offensive line, or they miss a block. He can make a man miss. He's amazing on his contact balance and how many yards he gets after he gets hit.
You know what's amazing about him too? He went back and watched all his carries from last year and studied the carries where he only had like 2 yards or was hit near the line of scrimmage. He wanted to figure out why that happened, what he did that he can do better. I mean, he's one of those guys you love to have on your team. He just loves playing football.
And what about the defense, gentlemen? Here, Gus Bradley in for Matt Eberflus. Matt, of course, taking the reins over there in Chicago. How different will this defense look, and with some of the pieces that they've acquired in the offseason?
Well, look, I've known Gus Bradley for a long time. Gus Bradley's one of those guys that wants to play that cover 3 defensive shell. That's what he likes to do. He's evolved from it a little bit. But this is a team that needs to rush the passer better. You look at their sack numbers from a year ago. They had 33 sacks. They went out and got Yannick Ngakoue. Gus knows him. He drafted him in Jacksonville. I think he's a guy that can amp up their pass rush. But Kwity Paye also needs to step up his game. 33 sacks for a team that's trying to push for a division title clearly isn't enough.
Yeah, and they tried to upgrade their secondary too, going out and get a Gilmore type player who can be an impact player on this defense. And Gus, in his defenses, he's always had an impact type safety. So you had Derwin James when he was out with the Chargers, when he was out in Seattle, Earl Thomas. So it'll be interesting because I really liked Blackman when he came out of the draft a few years ago. If he can make that same type of impact on this defense as those other safeties that Gus has worked with.
You mentioned the safeties real quick. They did have a retirement. Kari Willis retired, and so now Nick Cross, a rookie, might be a starting safety on the back end for the Colts, and he's an impressive-looking player.
Pete, Rick, certainly appreciate it. If you have something interesting at lunch, make sure you tweet that out. I'd love to see what you guys are experiencing out there in Westfield, Indiana. The guys.
We're going to the farmhouse, Tommy. Yeah. Right over to the farmhouse. Right over there, over Dane's shoulder. We're going to the farmhouse.
We're either going to have we're going to have meat and potatoes for sure. That's Midwest.
Or they're going to run us off their property, probably because I'm there.
Love it, Jeds. Appreciate it. We continue our camp coverage here on CBS Sports HQ. Again, Colts and Chargers today. The Hall of Fame game on Thursday night, but we still have, of course, camp coverage of both of those teams. Speaking of the Jags and Raiders, again, I mentioned Matt Corral is because Matt Corral and Michael Pittman actually played on the same high school football team. So during the Combine, I thought that maybe they could get together. But, of course, Indy going with another veteran in Matt Ryan and Matt Corral there in that very packed quarterback group out in Carolina. Speaking of Carolina, we had Josina Anderson with the Panthers yesterday.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.